This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
A national betrayal. That's what Markham Hislop is calling Alberta and Ontario's memorandum of understanding, this deal that they've reached to explore energy opportunities, energy expansion opportunities. This is Premier Doug Ford's move, part of his positioning, I suppose, in the role as chair of the Council of the Federation. You know that Canada's premiers, as well as the Prime Minister, have committed to doing what they can to eliminate or at least cut back on these interprovincial trade barriers. And a big move, a stampede time move by Alberta and Ontario, being lambasted by the Energi journalist that you're familiar with. If you're a regular to this show, we're going to get to Markham in about 10 minutes. Wyatt Sharpe to follow. You remember him, the teenage journalist, this phenom that launched his own talk show on YouTube. He's got a cable news show now as well out of the United States. We're going to check in with Wyatt on Canada and U.S. relations, but also just because it's been a while since we've connected with this guy, and one of the most impressive young talents I've seen, storytelling-wise anyway, in a long time. Real talkers seem to enjoy our check-ins with Wyatt Sharpe as well, and so we know you'll look forward to that in about a half hour into this episode. But we lead today with the acknowledgement that the greatest outdoor show on earth, that's the Calgary Stampede, is continuing into its final weekend. And of course, along with the Midway and the rodeo, the chucks, and everything else that everybody pays attention to, the hobnobbing, the handshaking, the shoulder rubbing that happens at the Calgary Stampede is some of the most significant, you have to imagine, in the country, in particular in Western Canada. We've joked about this on the show. The cake flipping, right? The horse riding. Pierre Poilievre appearing in the Stampede Parade. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister. Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, welcoming her colleagues as well. All of them for the photo ops, but also for these valuable networking opportunities. The Calgary Stampede is where business happens. It's where relationships are forged, and it's where a lot of connections take place, oftentimes for the first time. But reports are that this edition, the 2025 edition of the Calgary Stampede, has felt a little bit different. So we thought we'd check in with somebody who's on the ground there in Calgary. She's seen her fair share of Calgary Stampedes as a local. She's been there as an elected official, a former Alberta cabinet minister, and now as an executive in private industry. And it's a real pleasure for a Stampede report on the street to welcome back to the show Leela Aheer. My friend, how have you been?
Ryan, it's so nice to see you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm actually in Langdon right now. I'm going into a meeting here in a little bit, but I was so happy to hear from you. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. The show's been good. We always say to people, typically in the summer, that's when talk show hosts take all their time off because people are out of their regular listening habits and they're on vacation, but our podcast numbers are only up. I have to assume people are taking us on their road trips, which we greatly appreciate. And you and I, let's give everyone a peek behind the curtain. We had checked in with one another privately, just as pals, and we're going, how are you been? How have you been? How are you doing? Tell me about your new opportunity. And then you said to me, I can't help but notice that this year's Stampede, the Calgary Stampede, has felt a little bit different. What do you mean?
I don't know. There's such an interesting conversation that's happening. There's a mix of trying to understand what's going to happen with a really, really strong sense of hope. And it's interesting because, normally, and maybe it's because I'm sort of out of the political side of things, so the conversations might be slightly different, but as a business person and a person who's doing capital raises and all of that and looking for to influence directions in life sciences and other things, and, there's so many people that are out there having these conversations. There was just a really general great feeling around business and organizations and companies that were having these conversations. And I think the notable thing that kept coming up was how generous both Mr. Carney and Ms. Smith had been with each other throughout the entire through the progress of Mark Carney being here for the couple of days that he was here for the Stampede, it was really, really lovely to see people from both sides really chatting about that in a very positive way. And it just showed, how they're talking about unity and all of these things that that are such an opportunity right now for Canada. I felt that. I felt it really deeply, actually.
Okay, so I'll give people the primer. I'm sure that everybody remembers, if you're just joining us on the Real Talk live stream, our feature interview today with Leela Aheer, presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. You served Albertans as an MLA, as a cabinet minister, Minister of Culture, Multiculturalism, and the Status of Women. You're now a chief growth officer with the Biosport, leading innovation in sports genomics, which I think is phenomenal, as well as senior director of strategy at BioAero, advancing global precision health and longevity initiative. So you've got a lot going on right now, but like I said, you see this, I think, through a number of different lenses. As a cabinet minister, take us back to that time. You've got the hat and the boots, and you're attending all the Stampede parties and the mixers, and the lobbyists are throwing parties, and the law firms are throwing parties, and the energy companies are throwing parties. Everybody's doing it. Has there typically been in past, in particular with Liberal prime ministers, let's say Justin Trudeau most recently, some sort of a palpable tension when the Liberal prime minister was in the city of Calgary? Take us back into your memory banks.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but there was a breakfast that I attended when I was running for the leadership race. And it was in Northeast Calgary, and a humongous amount of folks from my riding in Chestermere, Strathmore, from Conridge, from the Southeast Asian community had gone because Trudeau was showing up at this event. And I was actually helping my friend do some work over there, and I ended up popping by, and that was George Chahal's breakfast, which, under my understanding and at the time, we visited everybody. We had lots of Liberals and NDPs and everybody. They all attended events together because it's a petting zoo, right, for everybody.
For sure.
And so I'd gone there, and then Mr. Trudeau had shown up, and then there was this whole controversy on around me being in the same space, heaven forbid, of the prime minister at that time. I don't even think there's a single picture together of us, but anyways, it became this big thing. But what I realized at that, and that's just my personal experience from that, but I have always believed in working across political lines. The best legislation, the best work that is done is when you can really collaborate with people. And the sentiment obviously was an anti-Trudeau sentiment, and that was very unified and became more and more powerful as time went on and as that government continued down their pathway. But having said that, I would have to say that generally speaking, in the past, things have been it's different in the House and out of the House for those conversations. And Stampede is one of those places where you can sit and have, a cup of coffee with somebody who you completely, you're on opposite sides of the ideological spectrum, as it were. But this was different. This is different than just your regular generosity of Alberta. You could tell from the conversations and the way that they spoke about each other that that the premier and the prime minister, there seems to be a genuine chemistry on how they're talking and where they're going with this. And if things improve, I think that a lot of it will be because of the relationships that they're building, and the huge desire, obviously, for Premier Smith's show, he says Alberta first, but there is no capacity for Alberta to be successful unless the rest of Canada is on board. And Mr. Carney's been talking about, influential trade and, the national infrastructure, all of the things that we've all talked about for a long time. So it was really, you see this picture? I love this picture. I just think it's really genuine.
For folks listening on the podcast, this is a photo of a cowboy hatted Prime Minister Mark Carney, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. I mean, they got big smiles on their faces, but anybody can force a smile for a photo, but I don't know. This one just kind of doesn't feel forced. You know what I find particularly interesting about this is that of the past at least three, and I'll say probably of maybe of any Alberta premier. I don't know. We could debate the legacy of Peter Lougheed standing up to Ottawa and the like, but I would say that Danielle Smith has probably been the most antagonistic of any Alberta premier in history when it comes to the province's relationship with Ottawa. So why do you think this is happening? It's got to be about way more than the fact that it's not Trudeau and Mark Carney's from Edmonton. It's got to be more than that.
Yeah, they're speaking the same language. And I think that any premier, especially in Alberta, there's only so much you can do with negative talk and rhetoric, especially if things are going to change in a way that helps Albertans. Like if you look at the numbers, right, on the separatist side of things and all of that, the numbers are interesting because there was one question that was asked, I think, by Angus Reid that it was interesting the way that they posed it. I'm sorry if I'm not getting this correct. It's just off the top of my head. But from what I interpreted from that is that while the separatist feeling is very strong, and we understand the frustrations that Albertans have for sure, that if Mark Carney's able to change the conversation on pipelines and acknowledges Alberta's place in the economy of Canada and realizes really what a gem this province is and what our contributions are, that most people would be okay with that. And I'm not saying that they're going to support the ideological processes of any particular government, but do you notice, like, you know, with Mr. Carney, like there's not an ideological line of anything and anything he says. It's really, really directed. It seems to me, I mean, it's the business part of him, right? He's able to mirror and reflect the people that he's in. He understands the room that he's in. I really appreciate it. And there's been so much anxiety for the people of Alberta and for people of Canada. And the opportunity to really unite right now is so powerful. And I just really impressed to see people take advantage of the power of this moment.
Yeah,
I think it's great for Alberta.
Yeah. I mean, like we've said, I mean, you know, this is about trying to find the balance, I think, for the general public. And the Premier's message, Danielle Smith's message to the rest of the country has to be what's good for the goose is what's good for the gander. Like what's good for Alberta is good for Canada. I'll reference Chris Varco's reporting in the Calgary Herald, the Prime Minister saying that it's, quote, highly likely that an oil pipeline will make Ottawa's major project list. Leela, you were deputy leader of the United Conservatives. You're an MLA back in the Wild Rose days. You've seen a lot. Help me understand why Justin Trudeau gets no credit for investing in TMX, while Mark Carney appears to be getting a ton of credit, at least in these rooms, for entertaining the idea and alleging that Ottawa's going to be behind the approval process, or the federal government will do what it can to get a pipeline built. Talk to me about how you see those situations differently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm on the record saying a whole bunch of stuff, so you could find anything about what I said, you know, and the timing of the things too. I mean, consider this. When TMX, when all of those pipelines were being talked about and the entire mentality around what needed to happen, there was so many shutdowns and barriers that were put up to the success of that pipeline, which costed Canadians $1 billion more, you know, to actually build that infrastructure. And it went from being a private sector piece, which I think Mr. Carney's talking about too, is that the private sector has to step forward in order to make this thing happen. But if you consider the way that that infrastructure should have been built, the health and well-being of pipelines throughout Canada, the way that they've been maintained, the opportunities that it presented, it was used, I believe the reason why Trudeau didn't get credit is because it was used as a like a politicized emotional attack on the sector, on the people, on the product, on, you know, somehow that Albertans were anti-climate change, that we didn't understand the environment. Like all of those messages were the ones that preceded any strength of discussion around whether or not that pipeline was going to be built or how it was going to be built. By the time it actually came through, by the time we could actually see movement on that, there was so much, I would say, pain and personal attacks that had gone. By that point, it was really difficult. It was really difficult to understand and to believe that it was actually going to happen. And it costs, I mean, Ryan, you remember, it costs so much more to build the pipeline that way by the time the government had to step in. And I still to this day don't understand what that was all about. I mean, I understand politically what it was about. And even Danielle, you know, she has to throw, you know, red meat as it is to her base and all that. I get that. I understand that. I've been in the middle of all of that. I was never good at that, but nevertheless, I do understand what that's all about. Mr. Carney's not doing that. That's the biggest difference. There is room for conversation. There is a grace about the way that he's handling this discussion. And Lord knows, I don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks. And if this is actually going to go, Max was making some interesting points on your show a couple of days ago,
right?
About his sort of, I mean, he's such a brilliant guy. I don't dispute the fact that he probably has better numbers than the average person. But I think that this project is it's more than the sum of its parts. It's really a passion project to understand. It states globally and to everyone that Canada's in the game. There's market things that are impacted. The market numbers are truly impacted by how a government sees the quality and of what it is that we're doing. And if you look back on what Trudeau did, he didn't see Albertans as quality people. He saw us as, also, I mean, I could quote all of the things that were said about us as Albertans, but we don't need to revisit that. But that's not what's happening here. There's a grace and a business perspective and a thoughtful approach on how to do this. And I think Mark Carney in his business sense understands the power of Alberta and how we power the country. And I there's just been so much anxiety for such a long time. As a regular person who's out there now without a political agenda, I really appreciate it.
We'll acknowledge that, dealing with Donald Trump is different than dealing with any other elected representative probably in world history. But I mean, I think it just goes, and I'm not trying to pile on the former prime minister, but I will just say it was also obvious in comments made by POTUS after he was elected that almost it seemed like negotiating with Canada was a non-starter based on his intense personal dislike for the person that was holding the office of prime minister at that time. I mean, it's hard to be leader for more than 10 years. It's hard when, what you said in 2015 is being evaluated in the context of 2025. It's tough when there have been long-standing feuds and polluted relationships with premiers. So obviously, we're happy to hear this. We're optimistic about this. Let me ask you on the flip side, and I know you got a bolt, but we got Markham Hislop coming up. He'll pick up on that on the pipeline conversation, which is great. But let me ask you as well. I mean, you served under Danielle Smith, previously leader of the Wild Rose Party. I mean, you saw her a long time ago. You've seen her political tactics at play. How would you comment or what would you note about her evolution as a politician? I would say one quagmire that I think she's going to have to negotiate deftly is this Alberta separation thing where on one hand she appears to be kind of playing to or placating the separatists. She says that her Canada includes Alberta, but makes it easier for a referendum to, or at least for the petition process to trigger a referendum. I think that public perception is that she's not as far removed from the Alberta sovereigntist as she says she is, yet we've got that photo of her with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister obviously keen on keeping Canada together. Talk to us about what Danielle Smith's going to have to do as Premier and what you've seen through her political evolution.
Yeah, I think she has to respect and understand the Western sentiment, and that doesn't mean that that's separatism. It's Western alienation, right? There's a huge difference between Western alienation and separatism. And if you remember, do you remember in 2019 what that separatist tone was like? I mean, it was the cancellation of Energi East, I think, was the trigger for that, and the barriers to Trans Mountain at that time. There was a huge, I mean, we could so feel it, especially in the ridings, in the rural ridings and throughout there. It was very significant. But if you look at, when you have a strong vocal minority that's expressing this way, I think that Smith is balancing that. I think she's balancing that really well in the sense that she's not sacrificing her Alberta first mentality, but she's not going to undermine the possibility of Alberta being successful because of a rhetoric. I don't believe that. I think she's smarter than that. I think that, Albertans are open to cooperation as much as there may be a separatist or I guess saying Western alienation feeling. But the cooperation yields tangible benefits, right, Ryan? Like that's the thing. There can be rhetoric, there can be all these things, and there's lots of things. I mean, we're gonna have to talk about a whole bunch of things on a different day. There's so much we could talk about and break down and unpack, but there's a strategic method that I actually really respect it. And I respect the fact that, you can be hospitable, but you can be strong. You can have a capacity to have, shake hands and flip pancakes and have good humor about all of those things and still be able to push an agenda that I think is very important for the well-being of Canada. I think that she's signaling to her core that she's not going to retreat from her, because you know me, I mean, I'm on the record for being against the Sovereignty Act. I was right up until the minute that I left the legislature. I never bent on my opinion there. And I'm a hardcore Canadian through and through. I love my province and I love my province within Canada. So that part for me would never change. Having said that, though, you have to convert that anger and the frustration that has been building for so long into effective action.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate, I appreciate where she's coming from. And as a business person, and as a person who is wanting to capitalize on the strength of Alberta and Canada and globally, I appreciate the grace that is being offered up here. I think it's really, I hope and pray every single day that maintains, because Alberta's as successful as we allow her to be, right? And things that slow down those opportunities are only going to impact the country at a really, no matter what anybody says about their ideology or all those sorts of things, we're resilient because we're the get her done people, right? Those are who we are at our core. And when you take away from that, what Trudeau did is, like, when his father flipped the bird right to Western Canada, and then he without doing that basically evolved that message to making Western Canada feel like they really have no part in Confederation. You're going to get the reaction that you did. Mr. Carney's not doing that, and I believe in my heart that Premier Smith sees the opportunity here. I think she's always been that way, and I really appreciate the sentiment and the energy and the environment that was set at Stampede.
Yeah, I'm about to check in with Markham, but we're going to be talking about Premiers Smith and Ford. I know you did have a brief moment to connect with Ontario Premier Ford. During the I can't believe you called it a petting zoo. I've never heard it called that. That might be the most accurate phrase I've ever heard for a Stampede corporate party, to be honest with you.
Politician petting zoo.
But take us into our interview with Markham. Your assessment or your interaction with Premier Ford. What did you take note of? He sure looks comfortable. I don't know if the guy can ride a horse or not, but he sure looks comfortable in that big belt buckle.
He is so comfortable in his skin. He knows who he is. He knows how to work with the federal government. Again, there's always going to be issues. There's lots of things that I could say here, but do you know that lovely gentleman stood around for hours and took pictures with everybody and took a moment to have a chat with me and remembered who I like. I mean, really, like, who am I in the grand scheme of things? I'm nothing burger, but he remembered, and we had a really lovely moment. And I'm hoping, obviously, for the work that I'm doing, I'm going to need to work with both all of the governments, the provincial governments across Canada and the federal government. And so for me, it was just so lovely to see. Again, it was just an energy. It was different. Like, whenever the premiers for their provinces have been here at other times, there's, oh my God, I'm so bad at selfies. I can't believe you're showing those.
We're showing, that's Tanny Yao. We're showing right now. This is you with MP Bexty. Yeah, that's right. You were actually, you had a chance to check in with Jeff Davidson as well. Jeff Davidson, Calgary mayoral candidate. He was up with us on our most recent episode.
Yeah, he's so lovely and he's so chill about the whole thing. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's going to have a great campaign, I think. But yeah, I think that like Mr. Ford, when he's been here before in other premiers, it's all been about, oh, Alberta's the land of last, conservative, stronghold and all of these kinds of things. And that was not the term. There was none of that. Like, I saw Heather Sweet, right? MLA for NDP. We're really, really good friends. And she was heading over to Devin Dreeshen's event around the same time that I was. Like, there was just such a, I don't know. It was lovely. I'm optimistic.
You're going to confuse people, Leela, that a former conservative MLA has an NDP friend and is chatting with a Liberal Prime Minister, and they can't wrap their minds around it. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people have so much respect for you. By the way, Sharon wants me to mention how much she loves your glasses. We'll get you here in studio, and we'll hang out for an hour sometime, do some proper catch up. You have to tell us more about the Biosport at thebiosport.com, which is this fascinating new project that you're involved in. But we got to get rolling. I know you do too. Thanks for making time for us, and have a great weekend.
Yeah, Love you, my friend. Thank you so
Love you
much for
too.
having me.
Thanks
So
very
nice to
much.
see you. Take
You
care.
got it. That's
Bye-bye.
former UCP Deputy Leader, longtime Wild Rose and UCP MLA, former Cabinet Minister Leela Aheer. In our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, the best or nothing. We're going to get to Markham Hislop in just 30 seconds, but I wanted to pop into our live chat, powered by Park Power. A ton of takes on this, and I could see you checking in from Facebook as well. Rob, watching us live there, says, yeah, Daniel Smith doesn't speak for Western Canada. Can we please stop with that? Robin Roasting is on Facebook, says, careful, don't be complimentary of Premier Smith on Real Talk. You won't be back. Robin's one of these people who has a hard time wrapping their mind around the fact that people can have conversations with folks with whom they may not always agree. That's why you're here, I hope, at least in part. Jillian says, yeah, you know who else made it easier to hold a referendum they thought would go their way? British Prime Minister David Cameron. He ended up resigning the morning after Britain unexpectedly voted to leave the EU. Jillian says you don't play around with referendums. Denise says, how many pipelines does Leela think are enough when they can't even fill TMX without air barrels occupying capacity? Bunny Slipper says, can we please get over Pierre flipping the bird? That was like 45 years ago. But just think of all the political hay that has been made, Bunny Slippers, ever since then. Our good pal Markham Hislop, one of Canada's preeminent energy journalists. He's an entrepreneur and a storyteller behind the wildly successful Energi Media YouTube channel. He says that a recent agreement, a memorandum of understanding that's been signed between Alberta and Ontario, right, Danielle Smith and Doug Ford, is a national betrayal. Markham, we had to get you on the show to talk about this. Thanks for making time for us this morning. What was it that first jumped out at the deal that stinks to you?
Well, thanks for having me, buddy. I always appreciate coming on your show. We need some context here. So let's back up a little bit. We know that, back in March when Mark Carney became prime minister, there was a huge reaction against Donald Trump. The threats of annexation, the tariffs, threats and so on. And Canada is mad as hell at Trump. And so we decided, as Carney said, no further integration with the American economy. We're now going to go east and west. We're going to dismantle the barriers to trade between the provinces. We're going to build things and we're going to export off our coasts to Asia and Europe. Different economy. We're going to re-engineer our economy. Okay, so that's the context here. And he passed Bill C-5. Parliament has passed Bill C-5, and which is the One Canadian Economy Act, which does two things. It sets the federal framework for free trade between the provinces. And remember, this is Canada. We have a weak federal government and strong provinces. So the federal government can't impose. It sets a framework, and then it negotiates with everybody. It needs everybody on board. The second thing that act did is it sets the stage to fast track big projects, pipelines being one. Okay, so what we're seeing now is the prime minister going to all the different provinces and having conversations. What do you need, Alberta, British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, to be part of this free trade agreement, this project that we're embarking on? Well, Alberta, Premier Danielle Smith has made it abundantly clear what Alberta's priorities are, and they are one or more pipelines, and the more the merrier from her point of view. Two, rollback of all the Trudeau-era regulations like Bill C-69 and C-48, and on and on and on. We all know what they are. And then three, an expansion of the oil sands to fill up these new pipelines, which would presumably go to China, India, and Europe. And what we're seeing now, folks, the deal has been done. Carney has agreed with Smith that Alberta is going to get a minimum of one pipeline. And what you're seeing now with these agreements with Ford and Carney coming to the Stampede and saying, yes, there's a very, very, very good chance that a pipeline will be part of the national projects list that we're going to be coming up with in the fall. All of that is just public smokescreen. The deal's been done behind closed doors. And now they're negotiating the terms of the deal. And what Smith is doing, and she's being very clever about this, is she's piling demand after demand after demand. I want a pipeline to Kitimat. I want a pipeline to Prince Rupert. I want one to Manitoba and up to Churchill. I want one to Sarnia in Ontario. on and on, and it's all negotiating tactics. That's what this is about. They're negotiating the terms of the deal. And she's putting public pressure on them so she has leverage behind closed doors with the Prime Minister and with Tim Hodgson, the federal energy minister. And nobody, not on your show, not on anywhere in Alberta, is anybody saying, hang on a second, is that a risky deal? Is there actually going to be customers over in China and India and Europe for our oil by the time these pipelines get me? Is there data? Is there modeling that says maybe this is risky and then we actually shouldn't be spending money on doing this kind of thing? That's what I'm trying to do, is raise the red flags and say, folks, there are major risk factors here, and this may not be the great deal that you think it is.
Joe is in our live chat. He says Carney caved to big oil. Do you think he did? Is that oversimplistic? I mean, isn't Carney supposed to be the savvy business guy?
No. Here's the calculation for Carney. Carney's looking at this as he's an economist. The guy's got a PhD in economics from Oxford. He's run 2 central banks. He talks in full paragraphs. He's one of probably the smartest prime minister we've ever had. I got a lot of respect for Mark Carney. So he didn't cave to anybody. He's making his calculation. He's saying, okay, I want a new national economy. We're going to expand the economy. He says we're going to be the strongest in the G7, but there are risks involved. And if the risk is that I'm going to give Alberta a pipeline that fails sometime around 2035 because there aren't any customers for it, he's going to shrug and take that deal every day. So he didn't cave to big oil. He calculated what the risks are versus the benefits of having free trade and more exports and building projects and all of that. And he said the risk, if a $50 billion pipeline fails, big deal. Maybe, hopefully the private sector will bear the cost. And if there's some public money in it, I'll be long gone. I don't care. Maybe it'll succeed. Who knows? But the benefits are so much bigger. I'll take the benefits over that small risk.
So what do you think motivates Ontario to sign this MOU, to sign on to this agreement with Alberta's government, given they're very different energy systems? You know way more about this than I do, but hydro and nuclear basically versus oil and gas, right? Is this purely political alignment? Like, how are you assessing it?
It's absolutely political alignment. Doug Ford has asked, and the Prime Minister has said from the very beginning, we are going to support the Ontario's auto industry. And we've seen now with Trump that, with the tariffs, it used to be that Trudeau and Biden lined up against China, right? They brought in 2024, they brought in those 100% EV tariffs against the Chinese EVs to keep them out, to give the domestic industry time to adjust and build out its own EV capacity. Then Trump came along and kneecapped the whole thing. Now Ontario's sitting there going, oh my God, what do we do? Where are we going to sell our automobiles? Trump wants all of our industry back in the U.S. So Ontario has asked, and Carney has agreed that they're going to support that industry, right? So they want a critical minerals deal so that they can build up a battery industry. They want EV manufacturing. There's even now talk of maybe we're going to have a Canadian EV company. All of that is part of the negotiation. So from Ford's point of view, for him to line up with one of the other big provinces, Alberta, and say, hey, we're supporting you, that sends the message to Carney, hey, I've got political support in our negotiations, and so I have more leverage so I can get more from the federal government to support my auto industry.
Okay, so when you use the words a national betrayal, that's such, it's heavy language, and I know you can't deploy, right, that type of headline every single time you release a take, or people will start calling you Chicken Little. Tommy Temper says you're so anti-oil, he almost unsubscribed, from your YouTube channel. But when you use the words like national betrayal, there's got to be more, and I'm not saying money doesn't matter. Money matters big time. Debt matters big time. Budgets matter big time. I think of a prime minister that said in front of a microphone, I know he'd take it back if he could, that the budget will balance itself, and he paid the price for saying that for the rest of his tenure in that big office. But is your big concern basically the bottom line here, or is it also on your radar that maybe this sends a message to international investors, this sends a message to climate watchdogs that Canada's not serious about its energy transition?
Tommy, listen up, dude. A few weeks ago, the International Energy Agency released its oil market 2025 report. It's the forecasting from between now and 2030. If you want to go beyond 2030, you have to go back to the World Energy Outlook that got released last year, and they'll have another one this fall. What the IEA said is that China, Europe, and other Asian countries are electrifying their transportation sectors so fast that peak oil demand now won't happen in 2030. It'll happen in 2029. And Chinese peak oil demand is happening this year, 2025. And the forecast is between now and 2030, it will be flat because petrochemical demand is going to rise 1 million barrels a year, and demand from the transportation sector will fall 1 million barrels a year. And then in the early 2030s, everything starts to fall in China. The one market we're counting on to sell our oil in, and it's going to be declining in just about the time that we get the pipeline built. I'm not anti-oil. I have argued on this show. In fact, I've argued on various shows with you, Ryan, for a long time that the future of Alberta bitumen, its oil industry, is in materials. Stop burning it, start making things with it while there's still demand to fund that. That's what I've been arguing. I'm not anti-oil, I'm anti-oil status quo. Because at the global level, for God's sakes, people, look outside of Alberta for a change. Look outside of Canada. When you talk to global experts like I do, it's an entirely different world. It's an entirely different conversation. The New York Times, I did a video about this a few days ago. The New York Times ran it with the headline, China has chosen electrification. The United States and Canada has chosen oil and gas. The rest of the world is electrifying. That's going to cut into the demand for Alberta oil. Not tomorrow, but in the very near future. And I can't say that enough. And who else, Ryan, who else has ever come on your show and said that? Who else has ever rung the alarm and said, hey, there's a major risk factor here that we should consider before we start building pipelines, before we start producing more bitumen and spend all the tens of billions of dollars that all requires? Nobody. And how blind can we be?
Yeah, I just this is why we bring you and other experts on, Markham. We make no bones about it. We approach issues from kind of like a real life, kind of real civilian perspective. And so I'll be honest, I hear a bunch of different things from a bunch of different stakeholders and members of the public, including audience members, to talk at ryanjespersen.com. Some of them argue that Alberta desperately needs another pipeline, that if Alberta could get another pipeline or pipelines, that it might quell the separatist movement, that it would kickstart the Canadian economy. And then I'm hearing from other people, and I'm not there in Hardisty, and I'm not there in Burnaby, and I'm not watching it. I don't know, but people are saying that, like TMX as an example, isn't even running at capacity. It's not even full. There's no actual justification for another pipeline. Be honest with us. Who's telling the truth?
Truth is not the issue here, because the problem is that if we're talking about the future, we're talking about forecasting, and we're talking about modeling, and we're talking about scenario building. The problem is that the government, the industry, hell, even the federal government, all look to OPEC for their worldview, their outlook, which is huge. Like, OPEC says we're going to have huge oil demand expansion between now and 2050, 17 million barrels a day extra demand. There'll be lots of demand for Alberta oil. The International Energy Agency, which is pretty reputable and credible, says no, the exact opposite is happening. And the problem in Alberta is not that people are lying or it's one truth versus the other truth. It's that they're not considering all the risk factors. What is more likely, that the OPEC worldview will come to pass, or the IEA worldview will come to pass? Ryan, I spend so much time with my head in data and evidence and modeling and interviewing global experts. I've come to the conclusion that the IEA is correct. And all you have to know is 3 weeks ago, OPEC Secretary General Haitham Al-Ghai was in Kananaskis at the Global Energy Show. And what did he say? And he was supported by Daniel Smith. He said the best predictor of future oil demand is the fact that it's been growing for decades. That's the stupidest comment I have heard this year. Because all you have to know is if China and the rest of the world begins to electrify its transportation sector, which is 45% of all global oil demand, that's where growth stops. And so that simplistic, goofy OPEC view of the world is the one that Danielle Smith and the industry holds. And somebody needs to come forward and say there is another potential future here that's risky to Alberta, and we need to talk about it so that we don't go into this blind and make mistakes.
So Leela here, right before you, talks to us about how Mark Carney has garnered this goodwill at the Stampede, and she talks about a bit of a different vibe where the Liberal Prime Minister and the Conservative Premier are glad-handing and making deals and shaking hands and being photographed together. She talked about the political price that she paid for even snapping a photo with a political opponent in years past. What would you say to Albertans to bring this back to this agreement between Alberta and Ontario to explore these different opportunities, this energy expansion? Albertans that see this as a critical step for protecting jobs, maybe their jobs, for local industry and for the economy. Like, is there a way to square those immediate economic concerns with your longer-term critique?
Yeah, there absolutely is. Okay, so here are some of the things that we've suggested at Energy Media. Trans Mountain expansion is now an 890, between the two pipelines, it's 890,000 barrels a day. But there's an opportunity through optimization to add up to another 300,000 barrels a day. And remember that every time you ship dilbit, you ship 20 to 30% diluent, which has no economic value. And you could use partial upgrading to get rid of that diluent so it would flow in the pipeline. Optimize Trans Mountain expansion. If you can expand it to 1,200 or 1,190, 1,190 barrels a day, all geared to, shipping dilbit, that would probably be all you need to serve whatever Asian markets are available over the next 25 years. Then why don't we talk about how in the U.S. Gulf Coast, Donald Trump has already barred Venezuela from the U.S. Gulf Coast market, so there's 200,000 barrels a day of competitors' demand. Mexico is in terminal decline. Its 500,000 barrels a day into Houston is going to disappear. That's 700,000 barrels a day that we could get for Alberta, and we're in a market where we are already the competitive barrel. We could start building a advanced materials industry in Alberta to create domestic demand for bitumen. We could do all of that stuff at minimal risk and minimal cost to the taxpayer. That's a much better, lower risk strategy going into a very uncertain post-2030 energy future than building pipelines and just doing the things we've done for 100 years. That's the goofy strategy. It's not in the public interest. We have confused in Canada. This is the definition of a captured regulator, a captured government, a captured political culture. You begin to confuse industry interest with public interest. And we elect our officials, whether it's provincial level, federal level, to protect the public interest. And our officials and our economists and our academics and our analysts are not protecting the public interest. They've confused it with industry interest. They're captured.
Okay, we're about to head stateside to check in with Wyatt Sharpe, but I have to fit this question in. Markham, we encourage everybody that hears or sees this interview to subscribe to your Energy Media YouTube channel. Buddy, it's so great to see you absolutely killing it on YouTube. Very proud of you for that. That's Energi with an I, Energy Media. And I notice here, I'm showing your homepage right now as we scroll down. Number one, thanks for the interview with me, a feature interview. I got to check out your platform. That was pretty cool. You published that back on May 13th, Real Talking with Ryan Jespersen. But that's not what I want to get into. Real quick, final question. You've just posted a video within the last 24 hours, electrifying Canada's auto industry while toppling Detroit's rain. Johnny and I in our Real Talk live chat were debating the future of EVs, prompted by a conversation with your buddy Max Fawcett earlier this week on the show. Give us your 1-minute synopsis of where EVs are trending right now in Canada and globally. The future of EVs as you see it right now in July of 2025.
Chinese EV analyst from the U.S., former GM executive Michael Dunn, who's come on my show many times, he says China is killing the global automobile industry and it's going to take it over and it's going to electrify everything. He said the only way the United States can counter it for Detroit to have a chance is to do the same thing the Chinese are doing. Trump won't do it. Trump is all about tariffs. So I argued in this piece, if Trump won't do it, we already have 1.6 million autos a year that we make. Let Canada do it. You want a national project? Let's go toe to toe with Detroit and take over. And Canada should be the Detroit of North America, because the Americans can't do it. They've clearly shown that. So let's show a little backbone. Let's show a little creativity. And that's the point that Michael Dunn makes. He says the Americans can do it. I say Canada can do it.
All right. You can catch that full interview on Markham's YouTube channel. That's Energi Media. You know, I remember a former Edmonton mayoral candidate threatening that the city could wind up like Detroit if it wasn't careful. Isn't it interesting how Detroit's been able to get back on its feet and be invoked as a positive reference in 2025? Markham, great to see you. We'll chat again soon.
Will do. Look forward to it.
You got it, buddy. You can also follow Markham on X at Political Ham. Wyatt Sharpe coming up in just a moment. Wyatt is doing incredible work as the host of Forum Focus on the News Forum. He established his own YouTube channel a few years ago as a junior high school student. His career's just been taken off. We're not talking to him about his career journey. We're talking about Canada-U.S. relations. He's talking to stakeholders, U.S. lawmakers, Canadian politicians. We'll get his sense of how it's all playing out. But before we go any further, while you're on Instagram today, I want to encourage you to subscribe, to follow Edmonton Chamber. You know, we're talking a lot with Leela about how everything's playing out at the Calgary Stampede. Well, the team at Edmonton Chamber of Commerce was down there, not just hosting parties at that We Are YAG celebration, but also connecting with stakeholders in Alberta and from across the country. That's what Chamber advocates and that's what Chamber members do. They understand that business happens as a result of connecting, networking, those types of opportunities that amplify when you become a member of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. Strengthen your business, support our community, bring your business onto the membership list like we did at the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. You can learn more about the benefits of membership by checking out their website, edmontonchamber.com. Friesen Brothers has you set for the weekend. If you're going to be entertaining, if you're going to be barbecuing, maybe you're hosting a brunch, they've got you covered from the freshest, most local ingredients possible to the ready-made stuff, the hot and ready-to-go, the toss-it-in-the-oven ready-to-go stuff. That mother dough pizza we highly recommend, never frozen, always fresh. And, of course, the sourdough cinnamon buns that Real Talker Dana professed her love for when I ran into her on a patio earlier this week. She said, I've started shopping at Friesen Brothers because I heard about it on the show. I said, what's the number one thing you love there? She says, well, obviously, the sourdough cinnamon buns. The first of every month, it's 15% off all grocery purchases of $75 or more at all 16 Friesen Brothers. Make sure you check out more information online. Circle that date on your calendar. August 1st, Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown and Alberta owned. You know, summer is a time when a lot of folks, successful Canadians, are taking a moment or two to pause and reflect on their career and retirement goals. At North Road Investment Council, they're working with Canadians who have done just that, built successful careers, and now want to ensure that their wealth is being organized to deliver a successful retirement. The typical client at North Road Investment Council has at least $2 million in investable assets, often coming from analytical, detail-driven professions, engineering, architecture, dentistry. If that sounds like you, the team at North Road Investment Council would love to open a conversation. You can visit their website, northroadic.com, to start a conversation built on clarity, discipline, and true alignment. That's North Road Investment Council at northroadic.com. Well, it's a treat every time this fine fella has an opportunity to make time for us. He's one of the busiest broadcasters that I know, and he's not even yet able to enter a bar in Canada or the United States. It's our buddy Wyatt Sharpe, host of the Forum Focus on the News Forum. Wyatt, it is so wonderful to see you. We're so proud of what you've been doing. Where do we find you in the U.S. today?
Tampa, pretty atypical. Not Washington. I
Yeah.
wish. No, I'm kidding. Tampa's great. It's fun.
Well, last time we talked to you, you were hitting live from Washington, D.C., keeping a keen eye on those early weeks of the Trump presidency. And I know that you've been talking to lawmakers and stakeholders on both sides of the border. When it comes to Canada-U.S. relations, the story probably till now has been tariffs. But what stood out particularly notable to you?
It's interesting because I think the focus, I mean, obviously with the announcement today of copper and of the tariffs and the August 1st date there, tariffs is still quite relevant. But I think the focus is actually moving away from the tariffs specifically and just more broadly towards the Canada-U.S. relationship and that of Mark Carney and Donald Trump. Certainly, it seems as if this relationship is more diplomatic, more respectful than the relationship that was had between Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump. Donald Trump had, dropped the governor rhetoric that he was using to describe the prime minister. He has at least toned back some of the 51st state rhetoric that we were seeing that he was using heavily when Justin Trudeau was in office. And then I think, the question is, why is he continuing with the tariffs, with this announcement that was made, with the 50% copper and August 1st that he's imposing on us. And I think it speaks to this idea, because he did the same thing in Brazil as well, that tariffs are becoming kind of more of a universal thing for him. And he's not necessarily using it as specific to certain, countries and certain world leaders as had previously been the case. So obviously, that's kind of the main thing right now. But I think, Canada is just trying to convince him anyways right now that, we have been each other's largest ally, that trade deficits are not necessarily a bad thing. And yet, unfortunately for us, it seems as if the United States has most of the leverage at this point.
Yeah, Martina Stevens-Gridoff has an interesting piece in the New York Times today. People can check it out at nytimes.com. Canada thinks its trade talks with Trump are unique. Does that matter? And I guess the question is Canada in a unique position as compared to Mexico or China, the UK, or anybody else? Do you get the sense that there is a recognition of that longstanding? I mean, there's the neighborly relationship, there's the geographical proximity, there's the World War history, there's all the things that Canadians point to when insulted by hearing their prime minister called governor or the 51st state kind of a thing. What are you picking up in Florida?
Yeah, I mean, I've only been here since yesterday, but I mean, I think just talking to people, generally speaking, like Florida's obviously going kind of in the direction of Republicans and conservatives, but I think people, what they're kind of saying right now is, I guess, when we're talking about tariffs, like they have been led to believe that a weaker US dollar is a good thing when it comes to tariffs. And they think, well, Donald Trump has accomplished that, so it's actually a good thing for us. And it means that he's doing what he said he was going to do. To the point of that article, I think it's a fair point, because I think Donald Trump is different than many other presidents. If this was Joe Biden or Barack Obama or even George Bush, like, I think that they would have a certain level of respect, just simply for the fact that, as you point out, we're neighbors, we fought together, right? Whereas Donald Trump, I think, just looks at things in like the present moment. Okay, how is it going to not benefit me necessarily, but how is it going to benefit the people whose votes I want to try and continue earning the support of, the MAGA movement, or to try and make it as strong, if you will, as possible. So it's hard to say, but I do think there's some validity in that article for sure.
Wyatt, we've long credited you for, you walk the walk, and it's the same walk that we try to walk, which is making sure that we're speaking to liberals and to conservatives, to NDP supporters. I know you speak to Democrats, to Republicans. You've long done this ever since you launched your YouTube channel. What sort of a sense are you picking up when you're welcoming American guests to your show? Again, that's Forum Focus with Wyatt Sharpe. People can check out the newsforum.ca if they want to watch it and support your journalism. But what sense are you getting from Americans, Democrats and Republicans, when it comes to that tenuous relationship with Canada? Is it troubling to them? Is it something that they're motivated to figure out? Like, what sort of a sense are you getting on the ground?
Yeah, like, to be honest, I've had a hard time getting people to want to talk about tariffs, because I think just for us in Canada, it seems like such a big deal. But I think that for people in the United States, like, it's just another news story for them, and it doesn't seem to be impacting them. I think primarily because they haven't felt some of the economic burdens yet of the retaliatory tariffs that, countries like Canada are implementing. but also obviously the impact of some of their own tariffs as well. And I think, there is a point to be made, I think. I mean, I asked Danielle Smith a question about this, which your viewers might find interesting, about the tariffs, and she was opposed to the retaliatory tariffs in the sense of, she said that they're the ones that are causing the most harm to businesses. So some of the people in the United States that I've been talking to, and again, not saying this is necessarily a valid viewpoint, but just they've been saying that they think Canadian officials just aren't examining the situation closely enough, which of course Canadian officials would say the same thing about the United States. I mean, Donald Trump says he's doing it because of fentanyl, but like there's less than 50 pounds of fentanyl that comes in from the northern border into the United States. Well, there's 50,000 pounds that comes in from their southern border. So yeah, I mean, there's a number of points again that could be made, but I think just right now it's really a question of balancing what's happening and just understanding that chaos kind of follows this administration, and you just need to be ready to cover and report on whatever it is that ends up happening.
Yeah. Hey, what do you make of this? Before we let you go, I know I should let our audience know we always love to give them peeks behind the curtain. You have an interview commencing in 4 minutes, and we have promised that we will not make you late for the interview that you'll be doing. But I have to ask you about this development. This is really interesting. 6 American lawmakers signing a letter to the Canadian ambassador to the United States complaining that our wildfire smoke is spoiling summer. I'll let our audience know that we're going to be focusing on this story more in days to come and episodes to come, including John Vaillant, who will make his return, one of Canada's most notable experts on wildfire. But talk to me about your thoughts on this. Is that a story that you'll be following?
Not really, to be honest. I don't know how much people genuinely care about the validity of that letter necessarily. I mean, you could say the same thing about like states like Oregon or Nevada getting wildfire smoke from, California. And I don't think that there would be letters written to the governor of California saying like, you're disrupting our summer. So yeah, not really, I don't think. But I mean, it is interesting. I think it kind of speaks to this idea that like right now there's just a hatred towards Canada, and whatever lawmakers can do to try and, develop some type of chaos, if you will, they did that, and now we're talking about it. And so I think like to a certain extent they do that because they know it's going to stir up public controversy and dispute.
You knew I had to ask you about it because we've got a Canadian journalist that's working down in Tampa right now, and so I got to ask about it. I've got my own thoughts on it. Part of me, like, I want to be careful in talking about this. Obviously, I don't want to say it's hilarious because there's nothing funny about wildfires and the destruction they cause in the communities they disrupt, and in some cases the lives that they extinguish. But at the same time, I'm not exactly sure what these Americans want Canada to do. They're blaming arson, and they say a lack of wildfire management. So they'd like us to clamp down on both, I suppose. Interesting story nonetheless. Wyatt, we're looking forward to the next time our paths cross. Again, let me just say it as a colleague of yours and as someone who's had the opportunity to watch you come up. We're so proud of the work that you're doing with the News Forum. Congratulations on your show, Forum Focus, with Wyatt Sharpe. People can check it out at thenewsforum.ca. Have a great rest of your summer, pal.
Thank you so much. You too.
Yeah, you got it. That's Wyatt Sharpe joining us live from Tampa, Florida, Johnny Infamous's home state. There you go. I saw somebody in the chat. I can't remember who it was. Was it Jill that said, watching Wyatt come up is making me feel old. You remember the first time we talked to him? I think he was 13 at the time or something like that, 14. Mm-hmm. And the very first time that we brought him to the show, and I don't want to keep saying this every time he's on, right? Especially to him, because he's probably like, can we please get over that? But I just couldn't believe it. Like, I thought it was maybe some sort of like a publicity stunt, like, oh, this 13-year-old has his own talk show. But then he didn't want to talk about himself. He wanted to talk about the issues. And then he's securing interviews with like all the Canadian premiers. And he's down on Inauguration Day in Washington, D.C. doing live hits for cable news. And now he's someone that I think, number one, is delivering reputable, fact-checked information to the next generation coming up, which is great, but he's also got an audience of like full-blown adults that are just grateful of the work that he's doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty impressive stuff. I want to get to some of the comments that we've got from a bunch of you that are chiming in. We recognize we just stacked interviews back to back to back, and we covered a lot of ground. The politics of Stampede, and then this national betrayal. Markham says that Alberta and Ontario has perpetrated on the rest of the country, and then sprinkling in a little tariff talk, Canada-U.S. relations on top of that. We want to hand the floor over to Real Talkers. Plus, I want to pick your brain on that wildfire story. Kind of a bizarre letter. I'm not sure exactly what they were endeavoring to accomplish, but hey, if you can't talk about it on Real Talk, where are you going to talk about it, right? We'll be looking to our live chat on that, powered by Park Power, and this is a perfect time to remind you, Real Talkers, that unless you're with Park Power, if you live in the province of Alberta, I can almost guarantee that you're paying too much for internet, electricity, and natural gas. If you check out their website, parkpower.ca/realtalk, you can read a little bit about our partnership with them, why both of us are so proud to be working together, but also, and maybe more importantly to your bottom line, you're going to get promo codes that are going to save up to $150 off your very first bill. That's if you bundle your services, electricity, natural gas, and internet. An exclusive promo code for Real Talkers online at parkpower.ca/realtalk. On their main website, you can learn more about what makes this company tick. They do incredible work in Alberta communities, including sharing their profits with nonprofits, which we love. As a matter of fact, when you sign up, you can choose which charity you'd like to benefit from the contribution from your account at Park Power. How cool is that? There's no other energy company doing that. You can find them online at parkpower.ca. If this is the week, if this is the month, if this is the summer that you have resolved to get organized, to declutter, if spring cleaning is happening in July into August, don't be hard on yourself. But do yourself a favor and take a few minutes to check out californiaclosets.ca. That's where you can request your free consultation with a designer that can show you exactly what they can do with any space, working with virtually any budget. Whether it's a garage overhaul, an entertainment center in your living room, maybe that dream walk-in closet in your primary bedroom, maybe it's just getting your laundry room organized. California Closets does it all. Proudly manufactured right here in Alberta. This Canadian-owned company proudly guarantees their installations for life. You can learn more about it and request that free consultation online. That's californiaclosets.ca. And if you are going to be outside this weekend, you're taking a look at that trusty old grill that has served your family well over many, many years, but you have to acknowledge the rust, the dirt, the grime, the busted wheels. Maybe just the lack of grill capacity is reminding you that you need a barbecue. You can check out youneedabbq.com online. This is a family-owned business in Sherwood Park, Alberta. Not just offering the best in grills, smokers, flat tops, and the like, but also barbecue classes. Quite frankly, this is where I fell in love with this business. They taught me how to do the perfect brisket, and I never looked back. You can get details on their classes online, and also remember, as Edmonton's big summer carnival gets set to kick off, that's K-Days, if you purchase a bottle of Unitas barbecue sauce or seasoning at Unita Barbecue, they're going to hook you up with 2 free tickets to K-Days. Yeah, that's right. 2 free tickets to K-Days when you pick up a bottle of Unitas barbecue sauce at Unita Barbecue. You can find them online at youneedabbq.com. This story was making news yesterday, and I figured that it would probably come up on Real Talk, and that, of course, the story of U.S. lawmakers that have written the Canadian ambassador to complain that the wildfire smoke is ruining their summer. To Ambassador Kirsten Hillman, that's Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Tom Tiffany and Glenn Grothman of Wisconsin, Michelle Fishback, Brad Finstadt, Pete Stauber, and Tom Emmer of Minnesota. So Wisconsin and Minnesota telling the Canadian embassy that, well, Canada needs to get more serious about its wildfires and the subsequent smoke. Now, 2 Canadians have perished in this year's wildfires. Tens of thousands of others have been evacuated. Want to be very clear, there's nothing funny about that. But the situation here with these American lawmakers, Republicans, by the way, publishing this open letter earlier this week, say, we would like to know, to the Canadian ambassador, how your government plans on mitigating wildfire and the smoke that makes its way south. They say our constituents, Wisconsins, Minnesotans, have been limited in their ability to go outside and safely breathe due to the dangerous air quality the wildfire smoke has created. In large part, that's probably true. They say in our neck of the woods, summer months are the best times of year to spend time outdoors, recreating, enjoying time with family, creating new memories, blah, 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 blah. But this wildfire smoke makes it difficult to do all these things. Now, Canada faces wildfires every summer, obviously. The worst year on record, technically, 2023, when fires killed 8 people, torched an area larger in size than England, according to the Canadian government. This year, so far, almost 2,700 wildfires, that according to the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center. Now, the Americans are blaming what they call lack of active forest management and arson, which I know is a hot button, no pun intended. Allegations around arson. Human-caused fires are a thing. Arson definitely factors in, but experts have told us, including on this show time and time again, that arson is not the leading cause of wildfires, forest fires in Canada. As a matter of fact, in 2023, that record year, in a bad way, 93% of fires in Canada, wildfires, were caused by lightning. That according to the Canadian Climate Institute. Of course, scientists also pointing out, and in this reporting from the BBC, Canada warming at a rate twice that of the global average due to its large landmass and its Arctic region. Canada's Arctic region warming 3 times as fast, say scientists. So something certainly that we want to take seriously, and that I think that we do. I'm not convinced that it was going to take an open letter to the Canadian ambassador from 6 American lawmakers to get us to take our wildfires more seriously.
I mean, I hate to be blunt with my first comment on the show, but I would like, whoever these people are who wrote these letters to get in a line behind a goat while I smack its ass and it kicks them in the teeth. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I love Minnesotans.
I love Minnesota. Minnesotans.
Nice people.
Wonderful people.
The closest thing to a Canadian down there, but they have their own, they have their own culture, their own dialect, it seems like, their own accents. Like, they love hockey. But this is ridiculous.
You're bang on in saying, by the way, Minnesota is one of the closest U.S. states when it comes to...
You go down there, it feels like Canada.
You feel like Canadian.
I mean, obviously it still feels like America, but it resembles Canada. It's nice. It's cold. But it's funny because Minnesota is one of the states that's falling behind. Like they, in 2015, they said they were going to reduce GHG by 30% by 2025. They're only 8% there or something like that. So they're way behind on climate initiatives, but they're telling a whole country who is one of the lowest emitters, we're way lower emitter than the states, that we need to do. What do you want us to do? You want us to put up a big sheet at the borders so the smoke doesn't get there? We'll do it all the way up to the ozone layer for you. But we're doing our best and you're falling way behind on your stuff. They had 73 climate actions they put forward. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. They've only hit 24 of them. So they're averaging around 30% of success rate of the things they're putting forward. Yeah. And they're one of the states that puts forward more initiatives than most, but they're just not hitting them. And so for them to give us a smack on the butt and say hey, come on, you guys need to shape up over there, it's just laughable.
Yeah. So they're calling on Canada to curb wildfire smoke. Which, like you said, putting up the big sheet. I know that we've invested in our studio. We could get a fan
and push it towards Ontario, or what do we want to?
We could just sort of decide who we want to pick a fight with next. I would suggest blowing it through BC, maybe onto the Pacific coast. Might give it more time to dissipate. But in all seriousness, I mean, and I want to recognize, by the way, this is a good time to remind you, Real Talkers, and please do subscribe to our email. Johnny, give me 2 seconds here. Let's do this on the fly.
Well, I will. I'll
How
just say
easy it is.
I said a stat wrong,
check out-
so I want to fix it.
Okay.
It was 2005. Minnesota said they were going to reduce GHG by like 30%, and they've only done 8.
Okay.
8 in like 20 years.
Yeah, okay.
So
yeah,
that's way
interesting.
behind.
I'm going to let that settle as I
Anyways, go
process it.
ahead.
By the way, I also appreciate the real-time fact check. We want to do that as
Wanna
often
make sure.
as we can on the show, 100%. So check this out. Go to RyanJespersen.com. This is like a 5-second pitch. We're going to ask you to do this. Go to our website if you haven't already. Scroll down the page, and then you see right there, here you can watch us. Did you know embedded on our website? Watch us on YouTube or live stream on the Mixlr audio app. But then at the very bottom, you see that right there? You can sign up to join our newsletter.
Ooh.
It's free, and we encourage you to do so for some exclusive insights, for some heads up on upcoming guests, our
Right
recent
to your
highlights, and all
mailbox.
that kind of stuff. Right to your email inbox at no charge to you.
No, we're delivering
but
them.
we will have. You're
Yeah.
going to do that?
Yeah.
By the way, I met with a letter carrier yesterday, just a kind of inside baseball, inside look at how that's all playing out. I was talking to her, and I said, hey, bring us up to speed. Real talk. We always want to be in the know, guys. There's lots of stuff happening behind the scenes. I said, we're not hearing a lot about this strike recently. What's happening? Tell us what's happening behind the scenes. Give us a sense of where that's at. That in an upcoming episode. But I wanted to make the point that if you subscribe to our newsletter, you will be getting something first thing this coming Monday morning, letting you know about what's coming up on the show. Johnny and I are stepping away next week for some personal time through the summer, which means that Real Talk will be back. Our next episode on Monday, the 21st of July, which just so happens as well to be our 1,000th episode, if you can believe that. So we'll be celebrating 1,000 episodes.
It's
Our
my
next
birthday,
episode
too.
back. It's your birthday. I wasn't even going to mention that. I
man.
didn't know if you wanted to get into that.
I'll let it go this year because I feel like it's a special day. It's gonna be a really special day.
Well,
for us.
we're gonna be playing. Well, I don't want to reveal too much.
Don't.
We've got a very
Don't
special
reveal a
episode
thing.
planned. There's one
Uh-oh.
ask out. There's one guest that we have approached. Technically, there's 2. But Joe Rogan hasn't got back to us. So there's
Guests in
2
the
guests.
chat.
There's 2 guests that we have invited to join us on the 21st. But otherwise, Johnny and I have a very special show planned. It is as well Johnny's 29th birthday. So we're going to be
Thank you.
celebrating that and
Yeah.
getting into that. But we will be talking more in that week to bring this long thought full circle on the 24th. That'll be the Thursday, the 24th of July. That'll mark 1 year since the Jasper wildfire.
Yeah.
Part of me feels like the time has flown, and part of me feels like it was 10 years ago. I don't know if you feel the same, but just being out in that community and just being so inspired by the spirit of the Jasper residents, of Jasper's elected representatives, of Jasper's entrepreneurs and business people. We talked to you about how proud we were of the team at the JPL at their golf course there for being able to reopen in time for Canada Day to celebrate 100 years out there. But of course, it does remind us that the strategy and policy around wildfire management, including Parks Canada, including forestry practices, including municipal bylaws, some of the things that we don't really think about, constantly has to evolve. So, the message, I think, to these American lawmakers that are writing these open letters to Canada, calling on Canada to curb wildfire smoke, is that, number one, maybe they're not 100% aware of what Canadians are doing. If they think that it's not on Canadians' radar, that we would be better served to cut down on wildfires, then I don't know what to tell them. The question is, could you or I be in an appropriate position to diplomatically respond to this type of letter? Like, it's kind of funny when you look at how Canadians
I
have
don't think I can
responded
keep
to
my
this.
temper
So the
to
Canadian
diplomatically
Embassy in
respond.
Washington, this per CTV News covering this, the Canadian Embassy in Washington confirmed it had received the letter and said it will be shared with relevant agencies. Spokesperson Taryn Elliott said Canada takes the prevention, response, and mitigation of wildfires very seriously. The Minister of Emergency Management, that's of course Eleanor Olszewski, she's my member of Parliament, Edmonton Centre, has not responded to requests for comment. But you go back to what Republican lawmakers have said in the letter. With all the technology that we have at our disposal, both in preventing and fighting wildfires, this worrisome trend can be reversed if proper action is taken.
Yeah,
I can't
and
think back. I think back to remember when Donald Trump was talking about raking and vacuuming the forests? Do you remember that? Like 2,700 wildfires in Canada. I'm not sure what these lawmakers think is the appropriate course of action.
Yeah.
6,000 water bombers. Is that what we're doing now?
I mean, we're trying our best here, but I will also say that like we need to do better, and I will like it's not lost on me. Like I'm not just going to be angry here at Americans because first of all I am one, but also because like I love this. We're talking about specific states, specific Minnesotans. Somebody I got Minnesotans.
But you got to draw the Minnesotans.
But we know like USA. I mean, they do better than us on curbing, on managing fire. Mostly because they have more money, more infrastructure, more funding. Wow. But also, we just know by scale that Canada has more wildfires. We have the big boreal forest. We have all that stuff. Like we know we have to do better. But to insinuate that we're just sitting up here smoking cigars while we're on vacation
and throwing the butts out,
you know what I mean? That's what it sounds like. We're doing the best we can. And like you just said, a year after people lost their homes, their businesses, man, driving up to JPL for that wedding and seeing like how beautiful and resilient nature is because things are already growing back. There's wildlife around, there's grass, but also you still see those fallen trees. You see those areas that have been wiped out, and you're just like, man, this is horrible. So I think, especially from Minnesotans, it was a little harsh. It was a little like unsympathetic.
I'm not really trying to, like Kathy in our live chat powered by Park Power, friendly local utilities provider, says those who live in glass houses. Listen, if you were busy on the 4th of July, you may not have caught this. Let me draw your attention to our 4th of July episode. That's my cousin, Philip Jespersen, who checked in with us live from his home in Altadena, California. Keep it on the screen, Johnny, because in just a second here, we're going to get into we talked about his family's celebration of life. This was a very unique gathering that his family held at his parents' house, the house that I grew up going to, 1809 East Loma Alta Drive, which is one of the thousands of structures that were destroyed in that Eaton fire. And Philip talks to us about his family's experience, what it was like to see thousands of buildings, obviously many, many people impacted when it came to, Pasadena, Altadena, and that region outside Los Angeles from that fire. But that Eaton fire, I think was a reminder, like, number one, of the power of nature. You had one of the most capable and well-staffed fire departments in the world. I'll recognize this was outside the city of Los Angeles, but the LA Fire Department, working with Glendale, Pasadena, Altadena, and many surrounding communities, had to literally get out of the way. This was like a wind tunnel that tore through this fire, and obviously one of the biggest fires in recent memory anywhere in the world, but also in an area with such population density. You recognized, of course, the impact of that much more, and I say this respectfully, than you would had hundreds of hectares burned out in the middle of Alberta's boreal forest. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a real reminder of the impact that wildfire has on human activity, but let's also remember the impact that human activity has on wildfires. I'm not taking a cheap shot at Californians. I'm not taking a cheap shot at Americans, but let's just say Canada is not the only country on planet Earth that has experienced wildfires. And I think that we bristle a little bit when Americans start speaking out and telling us how they think, that we need to run our own business. Like Canadian Cameron, earmuffs kids, Canadian Cameron in our live chat right now says, fuck anything that country has to say right now. You know what I mean? I think that people are kind of bristling right now, thinking of Americans stepping up. Tony says, let's build a wall. Build a wall between Canada and the United States. Yeah, Tony, and let's get them to pay for it, right? So I thought that this one might fire up the audience, no pun intended, but I thought it was kind of a bizarre take from those American lawmakers, expecting Canada to take its wildfires more seriously, not because of the impact it's having on our country, not because of the impact that wildfire smoke is having on 40 million Canadians, but no, because of the impact that it's having in Wisconsin and Minnesota. I wanted to circle back to what Leela brought to the table today. Kind of an interesting take on the dynamic at the Calgary Stampede. Hey, like, you look at her assessment of where this relationship is at, in particular with Alberta and Ottawa, with Mark Carney and Danielle Smith. And the number one thing that I'm left with after hearing her assessment of that is that it's going to be tougher and tougher for Danielle to keep going to the well of Alberta alienation and these gripes with Ottawa. the better the relationship appears to be publicly, which is what I think most people actually want, and the more that this federal government is able to get deals done with the provinces. It actually puts Danielle Smith in an interesting position. Number one, a tough spot. Because her, the kryptonite has always been, right? It's always been this saber rattling with Ottawa. But at the same time, she gets to claim the wins. And when a premier gets to claim the wins, that's a good thing.
But there's only so long you can do that. I mean, I said this. I said, what happens when Danielle and Carney start getting, I said this when Carney got elected. What happens when she starts pounding the table saying, I want this, and he just starts sliding files over to her saying, sign. And now, I love that Markham gave us that kind of behind the scenes kind of, insight where the deal's already done. It makes those pictures of Danielle and Carney at the Stampede, it just gives them more life, because I was like, why is she so happy? Well, probably because she's getting A, her province some things she wanted. B, it's happening really easy. C, she's going to get what you said. She's going to get to stand on that soapbox. She's going to get to wave that victory flag. But for how long? I mean, there's nothing to complain about if you're getting what you want, except to complain to get more. And then at what point do you look, I don't want to say greedy, because I do feel like Alberta needs a bigger slice of the pie. People tend to think that I think, everything's fine. I don't. I think, Alberta deserves to be a more prosperous than it is. But I mean, it doesn't happen overnight, but the fact that you're getting what you want, you're laughing, you got your arm on the shoulder of the Prime Minister at the Stampede. It's just, I don't know how long that works for her.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I think it's a great point.
You've got to be able to complain against Ottawa. That's her bag, right, Ryan?
Yeah, but at the same time, it's why are you elected? You're elected, as we say in our household, with the adults, not the kids, to GSD, to get shit done. And that's ultimately what people want to see. At the end of the day, when politicians are looking to get reelected, if the only thing that they've done is pick fights the entire time, then I think they should be indicted. I'm not sure if you saw this indictment, by the way. We'll get to it in a second. Keith Gerine. We'll get a little bit more local in just a second. Not this screen, Johnny, but coming up in just a little bit. There's been some developments in that zoning bylaw debacle here in Edmonton, and Tim Cartmell away on vacation. As you know, the city councilor, the mayoral hopeful, called out by Keith Gerine. But I wanted to make this a point here from Jillian, who says, you notice that Donald Trump's been really quiet. She says he STFU about those Texas floods. She says, I guarantee you, if it was a blue state, he'd be blaming the governor. We haven't talked a lot about these Texas floods. Number one, I think like everybody else, we're just watching in horror as at least 150 people are still known to be missing in Kerr County as a result of this flooding in central Texas. Also, hate to say this is not where the families are at. This is not where rescue crews are at. But when someone's missing 5 days after a major flood, we hope for their survival. We hope for a dramatic rescue. I hope all 50 of them have found refuge on high ground somewhere. But obviously, this is a huge gut punch to the state of Texas, to the United States, and to anybody that's watching. On a real life level, we were talking to family friends yesterday that had just dropped off their daughter, 12 years old, at a summer camp. No reason to believe that there's going to be anything wrong at the summer camp, but they said that they did take that extra second. You know what I mean? They took that extra minute for that extra hug when they're dropping their daughter off at her summer camp after seeing nothing but Texas flood coverage in the news for the past 3 days as families destroyed. I mean, families' lives changed forever in the most heartbreaking, heart-wrenching kind of a way as they think of in the circumstances of these camps, their young daughters swept away under terrifying circumstances. Local officials are still, by the way, we just want to put this on your radar in case you've not been following this story, still defending their response to the flooding. This is kind of a common theme, and I'm not calling anybody out here. I'm not pretending like I was privy to the decisions being made there. We don't know the truth about which weather monitoring services or which scientific monitoring had been cut based on budget or what was still at play here. But a lot of these local officials, you remember the same thing when you see communities evacuated by wildfire. There are parallels here. People say, why did the evacuation call come so late? Why did people have such limited time to get out of there? On the flip side, of course, it would be, why did you mass evacuate a town town or a city that ultimately the fire dodged, right? But in the first hour of that flash flood emergency, this happened on their Independence Day, on the 4th of July. Police rescued over 200 people, evacuated over 100 homes. They said that the tragedy could have been so much worse. But FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has been working in partnership with military, with law enforcement, with volunteers, trying to deploying those critical search and rescue teams, life-saving resources. But the officials telling CNN that almost instantly they were running into bureaucratic obstacles. So this is a story to keep an eye on, of course, as fire, flood, mudslides, other natural disasters happen. People, of course, and I don't say this disrespectfully, but the armchair officials start to chime in on how they think that those disasters should have been managed. But this one in Texas, I don't know how you've been processing it. I find that like you're watching stuff like that and you're seeing these parents that are being interviewed. Number one, the parents are living their worst nightmare, probably praying every night that they're going to wake up and realize this has all been a bad dream. And then let's also recognize the journalists that are doing these interviews. It's the worst possible assignment to be putting a microphone in front of a parent's face, a parent that is desperately searching for their child. I can't even imagine it. But like to state the obvious, whether it's what's happening in Gaza, whether it's the floods in Texas, whether it's the famine that we see in certain parts of Africa, sustained famine conditions over years. When it's kids, I know what I'm saying is so obvious, but when it's kids, it just hits so differently, and that story in Texas is no different at all. Jillian making a good point about that. Others of you talking about the politics of Stampede, we'd love to hear from you as you head into that final weekend. And I want to let you know as well, coming up on our next episode of the show, we're going to go to our 2 official Stampede correspondents. They are the co-hosts of The Discourse. Both of them have been hatted and booted for like 10 straight days down at the Calgary Stampede, and we're going to be welcoming Cheryl Oates and Erica Barudis to our next episode of the show. That's going to be coming up on Friday, July 11th. You won't want to miss that one. Before we wrap, I have conviction that one of you, this is a special message for that one podcast listener, one of you watching on YouTube right now that is about to head into work or on your way home from work at a job you absolutely can't stand. It's a dead-end job. Maybe it's a dead-end industry. Maybe they don't appreciate you. Maybe you're not making enough money. Maybe there's no room for growth or career advancement. Kubi's putting out the call. That's right. Kubi Renewable Energy is hiring right now. You can check them out online at kuby.ca. If you live in Alberta or BC, or you'd love to, you can check out the work that they're doing on their website, and in particular, Solar by Kubi. You click on the web link, you go straight to careers, and in real time, you can see the jobs that they currently have posted in Edmonton, Calgary, Kamloops, Lethbridge, and Kelowna. Whether you're working in sales, installation, office administration, there's a ton of opportunity. Kubi celebrating 10 years in business. Solar simplified and people powered. Of course, Kubi also proudly presenting Positive Reflections, the first episode of every week, right here on Real Talk. You can find them online. Learn more about what they're doing at kubi.ca. And we've been telling you about how excited we are for our friends at UCAN Youth Services. They have just secured the keys for a brand new building downtown Edmonton. We're going to be taking you through there. We'll do a video tour. That's coming up in weeks to come when they're ready to officially unveil the space. But the biggest and best part about this growth is that they're going to be able to expand their offerings, their outreach to vulnerable young people aged 12 to 24 that are having sustained run-ins with the law, that are outside of sustainable employment. They're outside of school if maybe they could be back in there. They're mixing and mingling with the troublesome peer group. And quite frankly, well, they're on a difficult path. They're on a road that doesn't end well. UCAN is partnering with employers like IKEA through their Road to Work Inverto projects to provide these trained, skilled young people with employment opportunities. But to make that happen, they need to be able to partner with employers just like you. This is a way for your business to access skilled, motivated candidates in entry-level positions while supporting the next generation of professionals. You can learn more about becoming an employment partner with UCAN Youth Services by checking out their website, ucan.ca. Shout out to Ms. B, $10 in the YouTube Super Chat. Thank you very much, Ms. B. She says, here's some drinks for you, Johnny and Jespo, to go with those cigars. There you go. What are you feeling today? Maybe a tequila soda as we head into the weekend?
I'm not feeling like a cigar, but yeah, I'll have the tequila
You're not, eh?
soda.
Can I smoke yours?
You can do whatever.
Taken out of context,
Just,
that might be kind of funny.
I don't smoke cigars out there, Real
I know
Talkers.
you
yeah,
don't.
but Jespo will have mine.
I told a lie earlier in the show, and I think I have led some people to believe that you are actually turning 29.
Well,
I should
okay,
clarify the
it's
record.
30.
You're turning 29
30.
again.
Yeah.
You're celebrating
I hate it.
another 29th birthday. Emily G, following our conversation with Wyatt Sharpe, just says it's so great to see younger people getting into politics. Says if we're ever going to fix this clusterfuck we have going on, it's going to be the younger generation. Emily, I totally agree.
Guy.
I totally agree.
And it's nice to see him with a suit sponsor. It's very slick.
I saw somebody, who was it? Someone else that was at Vamp Fashions in the chat. Somebody said, it's nice to see a young person wearing a suit instead of baggy pants with their hat flipped around backwards.
Yeah, that sounds
and I'm thinking what I was wearing into Friesen Brothers yesterday when I went shopping, and I think it was baggy pants and a hat backwards.
I wonder what they're wearing while typing on the keyboard today in the Real Talk live chat. Is it sweatpants and a t-shirt?
Yeah, isn't it cool?
I hope you're wearing a suit every morning to the show.
Yeah. Tony says 1,000 episodes, you guys. Wow.
Yes.
She says, wouldn't it be great to have a live in-studio audience to help celebrate that milestone?
Well, you better become a YouTube member because they'll be first in line if we do it. Head over to our homepage. Click a level of sponsorship.
Hey!
Real Deal and VIP members get access to our members-only live chat.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. Thanks to everybody that does that. Also, our Real Talk Patreon members and those of you that find different ways to support the show, including just telling your friends about it, sharing our content, subscribing on the podcast and on YouTube. We never imagined 1,000 episodes or whatever it is, 998 episodes ago, that this would turn into the community that it has. We had big dreams. We had big goals. I'm going to save all of my big thoughts on this for Monday the 21st when we officially recognize that.
Well, I will be bringing the Kleenex box because I know you're gonna get a little verklempt, as Mike Myers used to say on SNL. I'm getting verklempt.
Yeah. Tony now has kicked $5 into the super chat and says, I'm begging you to have an in-studio audience for your 1,000th episode celebration. She says, I promise to be good. Listen, these are types of things. We have our Real Talk community chat. It's on Discord. If you support us on Patreon, or if you're a Real Deal or Real VIP YouTube channel member, you can learn more on our YouTube channel about that. You have access to this Discord where the conversation continues. Johnny and I will be off air, so to speak, next week. We will be in the Discord. We'll also be sharing some stuff on socials. But we have been polling the supporters there, our Real Talk patrons, our YouTube members, on what you'd like to see for perks to the show. We've added benefits in past, some cool stuff, exclusive Real Talk merch. We had those really cool branded socks. We've had leather beer closies. We've had exclusive events like debate night watch parties, election night watch parties, those sorts of things. But it's been really cool to hear some different ideas from people that have said, well, we'd maybe like some exclusive videos with chats that extend beyond the show, you and I getting into it. Maybe insights into what shows or movies we're watching,
bloopers and stuff like
extra
that.
interviews, bloopers.
I just told Tony we're gonna come caroling at her house this Christmas from the 21st to the 26th, 10 p.m. every night.
Oh,
so
I like that.
That's your perk, Tom.
You know what we could
do?
For
being a Patreon member.
We could maybe get Real Talk handbells. Did you ever play in the handbell choir? You never played handbells?
That's gotta be a what kind of school are you in again? Was it Catholic or Christian or what?
Yeah, Glenmore Christian Academy.
Well, it
definitely was there, and there was a teacher there, a legend by the name of Joan Shifley, and Joan Shifley was a huge proponent of handbells, and I remember getting involved in when you're a kid, your world is your world in the sense that what you see around you is what you know of the world, right? Which is, if you think of the premise of that, is one of the reasons why so many of us, when talking about public education as an example, or talking about what community looks like, a big part of that, right, is exposing kids to beliefs and other traditions that are different than their own. I don't have to go too far down that esoteric rabbit hole, but to bring this back to handbells, thanks to Joan Shifley, who is an amazing lady, by the way, I was led to believe that handbells were like the biggest thing going in elementary schools and junior high.
Really?
So I think we were allowed to start. I think it was grade 5 you were allowed to start. And then once you got into junior high, that was the real big deal. But can you picture what I'm talking about? Like big, long,
Of course, yeah.
big, long
They
banquet.
sound
so
like
they got
Christmas
big,
every
long
time you hear
banquet
them, yeah.
tables. And then they have like, I would say about 6 inches of foam on top of the banquet table. And then you have a nice tablecloth, a black tablecloth. And then everybody lays the handbells out from the tiny little ones that do the like Christmas jingling all the way to the big like gong, like the big ones. I always wanted the big ones. Yeah. But here's what I remember most about being in the handbell choir, or the handbell, what do they call it? The handbell choir, I think, was that if you ever banged 2 of the handbells together, Shifley would look over at you. She would give you the stink eye. And then there was a jar. And if you did it more than once, you'd have to put money into the jar. She didn't want her handbells damaged. And I was equally thrilled and terrified to be part of the handbell chorus.
I believe they're also called, what they call tubular bells. But my favorite holiday
tubular
song,
bells, really?
That's like the official name for a handbell. But my favorite holiday song of all time begins with the chiming of handbells. Darlene loves All Alone on Christmas.
Oh my gosh.
Dun, dun,
Yes.
dun, dun.
I need to...
Handbells just sound like the holidays. They just do.
Yeah, no kidding. People are following up, by the way. Matthew, to clarify, says, I do wear a suit every day, and then at bedtime, I change into my sleeping tuxedo like any normal adult.
Of course, but not before. You got to wear the leisure suit for 2 hours before bed, and that's when you have a cigar and an old-fashioned. Then you get into the sleeping tuxedo, don the cap. Yeah, and I like
Scrooge, like the sleeping
yeah.
cap. With
So
the
when
long...
you get up in the morning and go get the paper, you look presentable.
I like that. Ms. KD says, by the way, guys, tequila soda was my drink and wine. And she says, now my body is pure. No smokes, no booze, no meat. She says, you bunch of sinners, says Ms. KD.
Thank you, Miss B. She has become a real dealer. I think this prospect of a studio audience is luring people over.
Dude.
We might have to do it. Not every day, but maybe just a fun one.
Do we want to do it?
I think we'd have to do it. We'd have to do it as a kind of members only kind of thing, just to see how it goes.
Of course, we're gonna have to get security
because shit could go totally awry, right? You know, we don't want to have that live. But then after a test run,
like we trust you guys, but we don't trust you.
We don't really.
I'm just kidding.
We don't know you that.
I think it'd be okay if we could set this up. I don't think it's going to be in time for our 1,000th episode because that's like in a week. But if
hey, Johnny, by the way, I know we have a week off, but could you set up a live studio audience?
You know what we're going to need? We're going to need bleachers in the back. What would be the perfect size? You'd need 30 people in here if you're going to do a perfect size. We're not going to invite you here without mimosas and proper catering. We're going to need to hire security. I will make a commitment to you real talkers that before – why are you getting me on the – I
cut to his close-up.
I'm prepared to make this commitment live on our Real Talk live stream presented by California Closets. Live from the historic Mercer Warehouse in downtown Edmonton that Real Talk will welcome its first live studio audience on or before December 31st of 2025. How's that for a commitment? Are you ready to make that commitment with me, John?
I'm here for it, baby. Let's go.
You know what we'll do is we'll actually set up some ambient sound. We'll call it wild sound microphones that can pick up the applause. And then we'll bring in some really divisive, polarizing guests. And then the audience, the live studio audience, can clap or boo as they see fit. This could be a great opportunity. To qualify, you'll have to support Real Talk. Alberta Girl says, Ryan and Johnny have become an exclusive
Not at all.
club.
Alberta Girl. 5 days a week, 300 and something days a year.
Yeah.
You're getting free content. We're just trying to give a little extra to those people who realize that maybe this wide shot, this is expensive.
And people
and we're trying to pay for it.
Well, I'm not going to sit and justify it. We're doing what we're doing. But people asked for ways to show support, so we're giving them the support. Ken K, but we told you, made the commitment, Real Talk will always be free. The show will always be free. Ken K says, a studio audience in a glass box. Ms. KD says you'd have to run a contest for seats, that's for sure. And Emily G says shit tends to hit the fan when you guys are off air. So if things implode, I'm holding Real Talk responsible. Every time we're off air,
it's true. It does.
A city burns down or a flood happens or
100%.
politicians start locking horns and and then we're sitting there chomping at the bit waiting to get back. That's also, in all seriousness, a great reminder to subscribe or follow Real Talk on all of our platforms, on TikTok, on Instagram. You can find me personally on LinkedIn and Facebook, which is where we stream live there. You can follow us on X and everywhere else. And of course, we keep those platforms active, releasing highlights and the like, even when we're taking time off with our families.
Speaking of, our short from yesterday is blowing up.
Hey, let's get into
on
this.
TikTok and Instagram.
Do you want to roll it?
Bonnie.
And then we can chat about it. So this is an interview that we did. We knew that there would be interest in it. I thought it was kind of funny. Hang on it. Let me just reach down and grab it. I still have it here because I knew we'd discuss it. This is Bonnie Critchley's campaign literature. This is the pamphlet that she's handing out at the doors in Battle River-Crowfoot, and it reads, "Who the heck is Bonnie Critchley?" Well, Bonnie Critchley is a retired military trailblazer who's an independent. She didn't tell us how she voted. She didn't tell us which party she supports yesterday, but Johnny and I both have kind of an inkling that she's probably a conservative. But she's trying to convince like thousands upon thousands of conservatives to vote against the party that they've been loyal to for a long time. Bonnie Critchley is running against Pierre Poilievre in that by-election that's coming up on August 18th, and we asked her in our most recent episode what her message is to voters in that riding and what she's hearing at the doors.
My neighbors are choked. They voted for this guy, and he ran away. He abandoned his duty to them.
You're kind of trying to convince longtime conservative voters to vote against the party they've always voted for. Do you think that they're mad enough to vote against the Conservatives for an independent candidate?
Absolutely. And I'm not the one who's saying that. It's all of our neighbors who are saying that. People are choked. Keurig sold us out to the angry guy from Ottawa. For us to have an election and then promptly have to go back another $2 million by-election because the guy we just voted in, who asked us for a mandate, suddenly turns around and says, no, I don't think so. Vote this guy in instead. It didn't sit right with me. And I'm like, I looked around, said somebody should do something about it. So I looked at what was happening when Mr. Keurig stepped down and said, that's not right. So I stood up. Victory for me is eating enough of his numbers that he's done. It's that simple.
Shots fired, Bonnie.
Okay.
Shots fired.
So it resonated, and she knows she's not the favorite to win, but I think that it's safe to say that people are underestimating her motivation. A peek behind the curtain, and we mentioned this briefly. It's always interesting to talk about people. Sometimes when we're doing these interviews, Bonnie was an example. Many elected representatives are good examples. When the Prime Minister was here, it was bonkers. There was like 30 people in the room, but she had her team, and they're all volunteers, right? And they're in the green room. And I don't know if you noticed, but they had their tablets out. They're
taking notes.
They're not messing around. This isn't like
it's not.
Someone
funny,
throwing their name on a ballot and trying to be that whatever. Like, they're strategically plotting out a path to victory. And while it is unlikely, nobody thinks that Bonnie Critchley is going to beat Pierre Poilievre. Imagine if she did. So our post on TikTok, our post on Instagram are gone absolutely bonkers. There's like 300 comments on Instagram.
My favorite is Bonnie should change her handle to BMF Bonnie. Bad motherfucker.
Jeez.
But it is like
Dustin Schmidt says, "Ugh," and gives the puke emoji. Jenny Dubbs says, "I'll be donating to Bonnie. She has my respect." That's another interesting thing is Bonnie was pointing out, like, she's been getting donations from across the country.
During our show. She got a few.
She was getting a few during the show. Philan Call says, "Thank you for giving Bonnie a platform instead of everybody acting like it's a bygone conclusion that Pierre will win. We saw what happened. Federally, it's not over till it's over, and she deserves to be heard and have her voice amplified." By the way, 285 likes on that comment. A. Monsma says, "I appreciate Bonnie's energy. I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out." Daily Stock says, "Democracy can be a double-edged sword. Right or wrong, Pierre Poilievre lost on election night. He should have resigned. Waited for the next election to run again if he wanted to. This is unnecessary money spent on a by-election. And get this, Daily Stock says, I am conservative through and through. This is going to be interesting to see what happens. Plaid V says, go Bonnie. I've never made a donation to a candidate or a party before, but I just donated to Bonnie's campaign. Kelsey Dork says it's awesome to see regular folks stepping up for their communities. Flex GLO2 says a real citizen for real people. Water, Soil, Air says I'm not a conservative voter. I live in another riding, but I am going to donate to her campaign. Mally Smack says, I'm not a conservative, but I hope she wins. Pierre needs, they say Skippy needs to stay in Ottawa, but not in welfare housing that we're paying for. I see that as a recurring criticism as well of the Poilievre family that continues to live in Stornoway while he's not representing his constituents.
But isn't this also like, this is like, for Pierre's team, this is probably the worst person to go up against, even if you aren't concerned with her winning. But it's a woman, she's rural, she's down home. Yeah. She doesn't have a ton of money. She's a veteran. She speaks with conviction. I mean, when she came in here, remember she said before she went on the mic, she's like, sorry if I yell. It's from my military background. Yeah. She's honest, and she's not taking this as a joke. You're right. I went out there as you were doing your ad read after. I was like, hey, stick around. It'd be interesting to just talk to you for a bit after the show off air. And she's like, I can't. We're on our way to another. She is dialed in.
Oh, yeah.
She is doing this. She didn't just come out here for a fun interview and then drive back to Tofield. She is making the rounds.
Yeah. Jillian says, I'd love to see that riding, Battle River-Crowfoot, have swing power in Ottawa with an independent MP. Could swing votes with a minority government. Again, I'm not trying to be a dick, but she's probably not going to win. She's probably going to get smoked. Everybody's probably going to get smoked, as Damien Couric, the incumbent that stepped down, won the last election with 83% of the vote. But still, that's why we have by-elections. That's why she's here. That's why she's making the rounds. She woke up at 5 a.m. to drive in from Tofield, Alberta, because she wanted to be in studio. She didn't want to do this over Zoom. I will note, Les says, I haven't even heard anything about the Liberal candidate. We will note that Darcy Spady is the Liberal candidate for Battle River-Crowfoot. We've also heard, as soon as we talked to Bonnie, we heard from a couple other candidates that are on that ballot going, well, when's my Real Talk interview, right? Emily says that Bonnie could bring cow pies. Others are saying, I thought this was a great comment from Matthew. He says, every time I hear Bonnie talk, I subconsciously get ready to follow orders.
Yeah.
He says her cadence, her demeanor, her talking style all give the air of a good leader and a sharp thinker. She referenced her military. Man, she served in Afghanistan.
Dude.
She referenced her military career several times in the interview.
Yeah, she's someone, I mean, all veterans when you meet them, but especially the ones who, clearly she was like, I don't know her exact rank or whatever, but she had to be a leader. She walks into a room, she just immediately strikes you as that. She's no nonsense. You know what she's saying is the truth, and she's not hiding anything. She's not sugarcoating, but also she has a plan. And I love that you said stranger things can happen. I mean, the odds are stacked against her, but you never know.
You never know. And quite frankly, if we want to be a responsible talk show, on one hand, we don't want to disrespect people that are participating in the democratic process. So part of me thinks that I'm actually really doing a disservice to candidates when I go on and say, they have no chance. They're going to get smoked. I mean, there's also kind of calling a spade a spade.
We'll get Philippe Fournier on to talk about it. You know what I mean? But we all kind of get that air of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Others of you are saying, Pierre Poilievre should come on this show and respond to the very good points that Bonnie has made. I do want to go on the record again and let you know that we have obviously requested Mr. Poilievre's appearance on this show many, many times, and we continue to ask, and the door is always wide open. I would love for him to come on and take some questions. Justin, by the way, just checking in. Welcome. Justin says, I missed most of the show today, unfortunately, but I'm back just for the end. What did I miss? Is it worth checking out the podcast later? Well, what do you think, bro? Absolutely. And we welcome you to that. Others of you are wondering if there's going to be a debate in that riding. I highly doubt it. I can't see Pierre participating in that. Kathy says Bonnie's not politician polished, and it was a real breath of fresh air. Tony says Bonnie made a really good point and suggested that even if he does win, goes through the leadership review and loses, will he stick around? It's doubtful. I hope that people take that into consideration.
Yeah.
We did talk about that before as well. Max Fawcett with the take earlier this week saying, listen, Poilievre doesn't have to just win here. right? He has to win by more than Damien
Decisive.
Carrick won. It has to be
Very,
decisive.
like
if the leader of your party,
Yeah.
you're the guy that you're saying this is the next Prime Minister of Canada, if he can't go in there and win by 90%,
yes. Like if she gets 30% or something like that, it's going to be like, what the hell? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That could end him right there.
Yeah.
Probably will.
Alberta Girl says, Jespo, once upon a time, Alberta Conservatives revolted against Conservatives from the East. Poilievre is from Ottawa now, and he may face the wrath of a revolt. Yeah, I recognize what you're saying. I've told you guys before, I grew up with the Manning brothers, with Nathan and David, and played basketball with them and had sleepovers in the whole 9 yards. So, I mean, I watched the watched the birth of reform, like, as an 11-year-old watching it happen right in front of me. I got an earlobe infection for putting a Reform Party lapel pin in my earring hole when Preston showed up at Henry Wisewood High School. My depth of awareness of what Reform was doing was significant as a teen and as a young voter. So I've seen it, Alberta Girl. I take your point. I don't get the sense, though, that Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives are in the same boat as, like, you know, Brian Mulrooney's Progressive Conservatives. I don't get the sense that Albertans right now, Alberta Conservatives, are in a position to dump Pierre Poilievre. However, if that by-election went sideways, that'd be a tough one for him to recover from.
And there's got to be a little bit of a disconnect here between, like, you know, Pierre can throw on a cowboy hat and a jean shirt and walk into Battle River, but, like, he probably doesn't know a lot about day-to-day lives of the people who live there. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I thought it was significant that Bonnie said, hey, I believed in, or she said, we believed, we voted. But in my mind, I know she didn't say she voted for Damien Carrick.
Yeah.
But she said, you know, we gave this guy a mandate. And the fact that, like, he was one of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is a disconnect with, you know, a guy from Ottawa who comes in wearing a cowboy hat. This could backfire. And man, would it be great for the show, Ryan.
Oh, unbelievable for the show.
Horrible for Mr. Poilievre, but great for our show.
Tommy Temper says, I want to see Pierre back in Parliament. He will take a strip out of Mark Carney. 80s Fanify says, a pretty tough look if he just scrapes by in a rural, heavily conservative riding. Jill says Bonnie's GSD attitude, I like that, versus Pierre Poilievre's whine is very refreshing. I like she referred to what Bonnie did as the angry guy from Ottawa.
Yeah. You can't really attack a veteran either. Like,
No,
he's
right?
got problems here. Like, and a woman.
And a woman.
And someone who's intelligent and stern and
from there,
you know,
and a
like,
rancher.
It's just check.
Right? And so they're going to have to be, if you're the front runner in a campaign like this, you just pretend like the others don't exist.
100%.
You don't acknowledge
That's what he's
them,
going to do.
right?
Yeah.
That's what he's going to do. Many of you are pointing out, you know, Jenny Byrne maybe door knocking out there as a formidable influence. We'll see how this all plays out. That by-election is August 18th, and of course, we'll keep you in the loop on that. There is this one other story that we thought that we'd follow. You know, we here on Real Talk, we want to be big on follow-up. We want to make sure that if we're touching on a story, and then there's a development that you're up to speed. If this is your only source of news and information, we still want you to be the smartest, most informed person in the room. If you subscribe to the Edmonton Journal, we always encourage you to support good journalism. They're not exactly independents. They're not exactly small independent media, but still, Keith Gerine does wonderful work reporting from Edmonton's City Hall. Here's a bit of a local story. A frustrated Tim Cartmell, his own worst enemy, during council's hearing on Edmonton infill. Now, this is a story that we've been covering probably in large part because of a very tense interaction between two other councillors. That was Sarah Hamilton and Joanne Wright, where F-bombs flew. But you know that Tim Cartmell has obviously been raising the eyebrows, not just of his council colleagues, but from Edmontonians as well, when he proposed that infill moratorium, Johnny. This was the one where he said Edmontonians are upset about this. People in neighborhoods are upset about these 6, and in particular these 8 plexes that are going up mid-block in residential neighborhoods that aren't used to seeing this densification. He says we need to press pause. We need to implement a moratorium on infill until we can get this figured out. Well, his council colleagues, as was predicted on this show, voted that down and said, no. But here's the deal. It's not Sarah Hamilton or anybody else besides Tim Cartmell that Keith Gerine is calling out here. He says zoning, as we've learned over the past 2 years, is political quicksand. And he says that council has mismanaged this hearing on the zoning bylaw, and what really didn't help, I'm quoting Keith Gerine, opinion columnist with the Edmonton Journal, what really didn't help was having Cartmell, probably the front runner in the mayor's race, probably, crazier things could happen, make a reckless overreach with his pitch for a partial infill ban, blame colleagues, his council colleagues, for its failure, and then petulantly blame them again for his decision to miss council's final votes on real and legitimate zoning reforms. We played that video in our most recent episode. Cartmell recording that video before leaving on vacation, said it was a vacation he couldn't change, said he wouldn't have internet access, couldn't participate in the vote, but the vote passed by one vote. And so critics are saying to Cartmell, listen, if you really want to be mayor, and again, I'll recognize, listen, people have their family plans. Maybe they're non-refundable deposits. Maybe you're heading internationally. There's a lot of things that can happen. The city clerk sets the schedule. Councillors have known for a long time when their break was supposed to be. If they're not going to get away then with their family, when are they going to get away? I'm trying to be reasonable on this. I'm an open-minded, understanding person. I'm stepping away for a week next week because I want to spend time with my family. So I get it. But at the same time, you're running to be mayor. You're running to be mayor. You've stood up and said that these 8-plexes are a real concern, and then the vote passes by one, and you're not there. If you were there, then the 8-plexes wouldn't have passed. Then you would have been able to quash or quell down to 6. Exactly. You would have been able to get what you were saying you wanted to get, and you didn't. So Keith Geraint's really calling him out here, right? He says this is a mayoral wannabe in meltdown. I mean, EPS, we'd like to report a stabbing, right? That's kind of where this goes. He says it's important to understand context here. He talks about, and Keith makes very good points about how there's kind of two groups at play here, Johnny. We've talked about this on the show. There's folks, empty nesters, typically folks, in the autumn of their lives that want nothing but a rise in their property values. And then there's other folks, typically folks at a younger age, starting families, getting started, first-time home buyers, I'm generalizing, that want to see property values drop or at least stabilize, right? And they're not. And so you got two different groups of people here. The one group wants their neighborhood to look like it's always looked like, and they want their house to be worth 3 times what they paid for it in 1976. And then there's the home buyer of 2025 that's going, it's like $400,000 to get into a townhome. It's like $700,000 to get into a single detached in the neighborhood we've always dreamed of. And $1 million all of a sudden doesn't sound so crazy when you're talking about a house with 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, which is what our family's looking for. I get where people are coming from there. So Geraint just basically goes on to call Cartmell out, and he says that council's public hearing over the past week or so, as we've been talking to you about it here on the show, has been to determine what zoning tweaks might best mitigate some of these concerns with multi-unit structures. And he says that Cartmell basically dropped the ball. He says that he can try to sell the idea that a temporary ban, this moratorium on infill, will give the time that city needs to get zoning right. But in Geraint's words, there's a snake oil element to that, right? He says after those 6 or 12 or 18 months past that moratorium, the most likely scenario is that council will be right back where it started. And Geraint says, while the public hearing did turn into a marathon, which did result in council voting to extend the debate, which did result in councillors Hamilton and Cartmell getting pretty pissed off that their vacation plans were being interfered with, quote, Cartmell contributed to that with his attention-grabbing moratorium, and it wound up cutting into his prearranged vacation time. He wraps by saying, all I can say, this is Keith Geraint, I hope Cartmell uses his time away to reevaluate his leadership approach, comes back to council and the campaign with a far more reasoned attitude. He says it's one thing to curse council, but Cartmell should really curse himself for blowing an opportunity to show that he's worthy of the mayor's chair. Like, that is a calling out in Edmonton's newspaper of record.
Enter Andrew Knack. No. So what did they do? They capped it at 6?
No,
they were going to do
not.
it to 8?
Nothing
or
changes.
They kept
it's
it at
8.
Okay, yeah.
So there you go. So mid-block,
you can still do everything.
Like, the numbers here are pretty wild, actually, if you look at it. Like, and again, I recognize that a large part of our audience is outside the city of Edmonton, but we talked to Jeff Davison about this as well.
Exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, but the zoning bylaw down in Calgary is really contentious as well. Alberta's I want to say an island, but Alberta's a little bit different, in particular Edmonton, but Alberta writ large, because in a lot of other cities, Vancouver hasn't allowed a lot of things. Toronto hasn't allowed a lot of things. Residents, neighbors, stakeholders have much more of a say and many more options, many more levers to pull to stop development. But in Edmonton, it's kind of a bit of a Wild West right now, and there's a lot of opportunity, which for a lot of people is a really good thing, right? This comes back to the city plan, Edmonton City Plan, which is about 5 years ago. 2020 it was developed, that lays out the road to densification, that attempts to stop urban sprawl, that tries to put Edmonton and Alberta in a position, this Alberta's Calling campaign, we're hearing people say it all the time. Jody Gondek, Calgary's mayor, talked to us about this in a recent interview. I think that was a few weeks ago. We talked about it with Jeff Davison yesterday. We've talked about it with Edmonton's mayor, Amarjeet Sohi, and others. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith talked to us about it. Alberta's population expected to double in the next 30 years. Edmonton and Calgary are both adding 70 to 100,000 new residents every year. So something has to happen.
But it's the age-old like, do you build up or out? I would rather see building up, but of course I can understand these people. I read the comments, I see the stories, I see the people quoted in these articles, and I always try, even if I don't agree right off the bat, let me put myself in their shoes, and I have to agree with them. If like you buy a home, you have a nice yard, all these things, and then boom, an eightplex goes next to you, and there's no parking, and all of a sudden there's 10 new cars in front of your house. I get how that would be frustrating. But at the same time, so is the city plan to just expand out farther and farther and farther? Because we have to build up in areas, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just downtown.
If people want to hear more about this and like, one perspective on this story, they can check out our episode on the 25th of June. This is with Real Talker Travis Watt. He's an everyday guy. He and his family built a home, an infill home, by the way, a nice big one, on their lot, just west of, about 10 minutes west of Edmonton's downtown. And he talked to us about the sixplexes and eightplexes that are going up there and his advocacy efforts as a regular everyday citizen. So that's the 25th of June. The episode is titled, Is It Time to Press Pause on Infill Construction? But Johnny, let me just throw some numbers in front of you. This is kind of interesting because I didn't realize as I was reading this, and again, I'm crediting Keith Gerine for doing this reporting here in the Edmonton Journal, but you want to know the numbers. Early returns on Edmonton's new zoning. The intended infill effect has gone beyond what is anticipated. City of Edmonton statistics show a record 16,500 new dwelling units approved in 2024. 16,500 new units approved, 40% of which inside Anthony Henday Drive. For those of you outside of Edmonton, that's inside the ring road. So more of the, you're still a ways away from downtown, but more than half of those approvals for multi-unit housing, including a lot of row housing. So let's say approximately, if 40% inside the Henday, 40% of 16,000 is approximately 6,000. More than half of those, let's call it 3,500 approvals for multi-unit housing. That's a lot of multi-unit housing. Now, not all developers using these inner city sites to maximum density, right? Some of them are knocking down wartime bungalows and putting up nice, beautiful, big, new single-family dwellings, but many of them are maximum density. Since the new rules came into effect, 80% of development permits issued for mid-block row housing have been for more than 6 units. 80% for mid-block row housing have been for more than 6 units. Yeah. So 1 in 5 is fewer than 6 units.
And I think, in my mind, and maybe I'm biased because I don't mind hustle and bustle. I've lived in downtown Vancouver, Toronto, here in Edmonton. Now I live on the south side, but I don't mind hustle and bustle. There probably will be a point in my life when I don't, but I also don't know what people expect when you add this many people. I mean, we're going to get bigger. We're going to start looking like those other major cities that are as populated, or some people say overpopulated, in their core areas, right? Inside the Anthony Henday is going to get a lot more busier. That's just what I expected when I heard Edmonton's going to have a population increase and it's going to be fast. But at the same time, I do feel for people who invested their money. And
100%.
It is kind of weird. I mean, Alberta Girl had a good point here. I do recognize that your rights kind of do end at your property line. That's where you live. But at the same time, when you buy a place, it looks a certain way. Yeah. You invest all your money and then you have no say. Can you just build factories now around someone's? You know what I mean, though. I get where the gripes come from. It is frustrating. I know. Yeah. I don't see a I don't see a perfect resolution to this.
There's not, and I appreciate the spirit that you're taking to this, and I'm trying to apply the same spirit to it as well, which is like, I understand why densification is important, and I also understand why somebody doesn't want an 8-plex right next to their house.
100%.
I can understand both.
And
I
10
think
cards
if you
out
pretend,
in their front of their house.
You know, and I just think like, and technically and legally, it's true to say that like your property, you know, your rights end at your property line. But like, imagine like if your neighbor said that to you, right? Imagine if someone says, well, your rights actually end at your property line, so beat it.
Naked.
Like, it's not,
standing right over the line.
Not exactly.
Looking at
I think
you.
was it Wilson in Home Improvement? There was always the guy like with the fence. Was it Wilson? I think
Your
it was.
rights
Or
end
am I
at-
thinking of Tom Hanks volleyball in Castaway? I don't know.
Rights end right here.
Either one. That Fashion says it might be a great idea to dramatically increase taxes for property owners on streets that fight against infill if they want the exclusive perk. Pay for it. Tony says the one concern that she has with all the infills is that their drainage and sewage infrastructure may not be able to handle all these new units. She says that has her concern.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic
Putting
point.
stress on that.
100%. I mean, you look at what happened in Calgary with that water main debacle right before Stampede last year. I look at in our neighborhood, I mean, they've been doing major overhauls on sewage and other infrastructure because like a lot of these pipes are like from like before the war. Like it's pretty wild, right? So that's another good point. Others of you are saying, Matthew, for context, how many units got built? He says in 2023 and 2024 combined, Edmonton grew by the equivalent of Red Deer's entire population. And Matthew's absolutely correct. Kathy says, I don't think most people have a problem with multifamily dwellings, but parking should be part of the consideration. Yeah, that's true as well. I mean, everybody's making great points. Gizmo says, guys, I'm really late getting back to work today. Have a great day, everybody. I need to see you tomorrow. Gizmo, same with us. And thank you for your YouTube channel membership. We've got a lot of stuff that we got to get going before Friday's episode. We want to be ready to hit the ground running for you as we check in with our official Stampede correspondents. They are co-hosts of The Discourse. Erica Barudis and Cheryl Oates will be joining us. That's going to be our final episode into the 21st of July, which will be 1,000 episodes, and we honestly wouldn't be here without you. I'm serious about a live studio audience before the end of 2025. If you want to get in on the mix on that, there's 2 ways to do it: YouTube channel membership, Patreon support, and of course, your continued correspondence with the show. Make it a great day, Real Talkers. Thanks for showing up day in and day out, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.